Hi, my name is Fred Wheeler, and I love movies. And I want to talk about The Magnificent Seven from 1960. The Magnificent Seven is the Western I always rewatch and have a great time, and I've watched it a lot. The budget for this movie was $2 million. The gross profit worldwide was $9.75 million. It did not do great domestically, but in North America, but worldwide, actually, it does quite well. This film has had a lot of remakes. It's been remade many times as a Western, a science fiction story, medieval stories from the original Seven Samurai. And for those of you who don't know anything about it, Akira Kurosawa did the Seven Samurai, and it's a legend in film. So John Sturges is the director. Sturges was already known for his action-filled westerns like Bad Day at Black Rock, 1955. Sturges admired Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai film from 1954, and he fought to adapt it into an American western. During filming in Mexico, Sturges had to keep a really firm hand on the cast of strong personalities, which got complicated. In one famous scene, in fact, this would go on so much that everybody was riding over a small stream, and each actor, as a result of two actors in particular playing off each other, each actor decided to sort of join the game. And so each actor did something small to attract attention to themselves and away from other people, until everybody started doing something crazy, and then someone started reciting Shakespeare. And John Sturges told everybody to just stop it at that point. Of course, it didn't stop, but at least that level of craziness did stop. Akira Kurosawa sent John Sturges a ceremonial sword after seeing The Magnificent Seven to acknowledge the film's effort. But Akira Kurosawa's opinion was that the film was entertaining, and it is, but disappointing with its lack of depth. And remember, he did the original, so I can understand that. Producer was Walter Mirasich. Walter was part of the Mirasich Company, a producer of prestige projects in the late 1950s through to the 1960s. Walter had to negotiate with United Artists for distribution, but he also had to secure the rights from Toho Studios, who owned the Seven Samurai film. The budget was a relatively modest $2 million, and that's because it was filmed in Mexico, but shooting in Mexico brought both authenticity to that film and a lot of difficulties with local authorities and labor unions. And one of the biggest stories that you hear about this is the fact that all of the Mexican villages had to be wearing white and they all had to be spotlessly clean all the time, which was difficult to achieve. Screenplay is marked down as William Roberts, but uncredited Walter Bernstein and Walter Newman are definitely involved. The script had a really complicated authorship with rewrites for dialogue every day of the shoot, which, that is not unusual, but there were a lot of other things going on. And it was written multiple times. Walter Newman wrote most of it and left the project after there were disputes with the producers. But I would say that the core of the story was taken from the Seven Samurai was from Walter Newman. And then some of the dialogue, especially the moral reflections on guns and villages, came directly from Newman's draft. And it's a shame that these things mean that, not everybody gets credited with their efforts. But then, sometimes that's a choice as well. And then also Walter Bernstein did early uncredited drafts as well. So there was a lot of people involved. So if people say that this movie had no script, that's not true. There were just a lot of rewrites, and this happens. William Roberts streamlined Kawasaki's epic into a faster moving western while keeping themes of sacrifice and honour. Only William Roberts is actually credited as writing the screenplay, unfortunately. Editors. The editor was Ferris Webster. Now, Webster was a seasoned GM editor, later nominated for 3 Oscars. Webster shaped the rhythm of the ensemble action scenes, balancing sort of 7 main characters in the story, originally designed for a really much longer Japanese film. And they really did bring the runtime right down and to make it much faster. Sturges was known for giving Webster freedom to cut gunfights, particularly for maximum tension rather than strict realism, and just so that the flow was fast. It's supposed to be an exciting movie, and it is, of course, because it's a Western. I like Westerns, for those of you who don't know. Music and composer was Elmer Bernstein. Now, Elmer Bernstein is very famous. Bernstein's iconic score is one of the most famous of the Western soundtracks that has ever been written. The Magnificent Sevens, it delivered sort of like a galloping rhythm that became synonymous with Western adventure. It's the thing that you sort of hear and you think, that's a Western. The main theme later became the music for the Marlboro cigarette commercials, embedding it into American pop culture for many, many years, because Marlboro used the cowboy as their sort of icon or representation of their brand. Sturges reportedly wanted something that was both heroic and bittersweet from Elmer Bernstein, and I think that it was definitely delivered. You certainly get that heroic aspect to it. Now, the cinema work, or the cinematography, was done by Charles Lang. Lang was an Oscar-winning cinematographer with a long career from the 1930s all the way through to the 1970s. Lang captured that rugged sort of Mexican landscape beautifully, and because it was filmed in Mexico, it's all Mexico. That's what Mexico looks like. And used wide screens to emphasize the intimacy of the village and the openness of the frontier. Then, of course, natural lighting and using a deep focus. Like, there's a lot of focus close-up shots in this that were used in the film to give it a more realistic tone rather than the older Hollywood sort of Western feel. So there's definitely a different feel to this movie compared to other Westerns. Special effects. Now, there's nobody who sort of stands out in terms of special effects in a Western, but what I can say is that gunfights were choreographed with authentic Western firearms, so they used firearms that you would expect at that time, and practical gunplay squads. It's common to do these sorts of things in Westerns anyway. Stunts and falls were generally performed by veteran Hollywood stuntmen, or stunt people, but stuntmen. Some actors performed many of their own stunts. In particular, Bronson, who did his own falls. And then, of course, McQueen and Corbin loved the action scenes so much they would often try to one-up each other and do their own stunt work as well. I think this is probably a problem for insurance companies, but they did. And everybody survived, so that's good news. Things like dust explosions, galloping horse sequences, close-quarter shootouts were all designed to feel gritty rather than stylized. A huge departure from the clean Hollywood sort of Western that we were used to seeing. So there are a lot of characters in this story, and their stories behind them are pretty nuts. So let's start off with Yul Brynner, who played Chris Adams. Already, Yul Brynner was a star from the Ten Commandments and from The King and I, and he actually won an Oscar in 1956. Brynner brought sort of an authority as to the, with that black-clad veteran gunfighter. And Yul Brynner pushed for the film to be made and secured rights from the Kawasaki studios, because that was part of the problem, and he certainly had a part to play in getting that to happen. Yul also served as a driving force behind casting many of the actors for the main character roles, including Steve McQueen. This is an interesting story. We'll get to this. So Brynner's influence extended beyond the script. It wasn't just that he had influence over what was going to be in the script. He was considered the alpha on set. And Yul actually decided to marry a model called Doris Kleiner on film, on the actual film set in 1960, using the festival's props for the celebration, as it happens. Now, Brynner clashed with Steve McQueen, who constantly tried to upstage him. Brynner even hired an assistant to count the number of times McQueen touched his hat or did anything that was distracting, or any kind of distracting movements, frankly, during Yul Brynner's spoken lines. As it happens, Yul Brynner wanted to get Steve McQueen into the film. He kind of regretted it after. They did make up eventually when McQueen was just about to die, for those of you who might have been interested. But it's an interesting process. They do seem like they are the big hitters in the film. Anyway, Steve McQueen. Steve McQueen played Vin Tanner, a veteran gunfighter who can't find a job he wants and is the leader's sidekick. He's supposed to be the sidekick to Chris Adams. At the time, McQueen was a TV actor, not a movie actor. He was in a TV series called Wanted, Dead or Alive. And so Steve McQueen was offered the position. Yul Brynner wanted him in it. And the producer, Sturges, wanted him. So he faked a minor car accident to get out of his TV show contract, because they wouldn't let him do it for Wanted, Dead or Alive, so that he could go and star in the Magnificent Seven. Very, very risky. Apparently it worked, and I don't believe he got sued. I'm amazed. I don't remember seeing anything about it anyway. Steve constantly fiddled with props and hats and guns and spurs and anything he could find to steal attention, deliberately trying to upstage Brynner. And Brynner had this tendency to, because he's so short, Yul Brynner would build little mounds of dirt with his feet during the filming to make himself appear just a few inches, or just a little bit taller, so that he had a bit more of a commanding presence, because he didn't like the idea that he was short, and standing on a box didn't seem very dignified, so he would build dirt mounds. And of course, Steve McQueen learned about this, and he would kick them away, and it caused a lot of problems on the set. So yeah. So what happened was that Brynner grew so furious at his scene-stealing tactics, and the rivalry lasted right throughout the entire filming process. McQueen saw this film as his big break into movies, so he wanted to make sure that he would stand out. But despite that feud, McQueen's cool demeanor and the action sort of focused style became his iconic image, and The Magnificent Seven is often credited as McQueen's breakout role that led him to going and doing The Great Escape in 1963. Next we have Charles Bronson, who played Bernardo O'Reilly, probably one of the most incredible characters in the entire movie. He plays a veteran mercenary that fought in many different wars, who chops wood to feed himself now. So the Mexican children reportedly adored Bronson during filming so much, he became sort of like a fan favorite amongst the Mexicans. And this sort of mirrored his role in the movie, but it was actually a real thing outside of the film. Bernardo's character had probably the roughest backstory you could imagine, which is basically that he is a mercenary who's been in every war, paid the best money, and suddenly he finds himself down and out and really just chopping wood to make a meal. He also has the most surprising progress with the Mexican children. He really sort of, that connection is great. He teaches the villagers to fight, and he's certainly one of the key characters behind that whole process, and has probably the most meaningful death out of all of the 7 who do die. Known for his sort of rugged features, Bronson was not yet a big star when he was in this film, but soon became an international leading man, especially in Europe, and later in the Death Wish movies, which there are other movies that he's been in as well, but Death Wish is probably the movie that Bronson is known for the most. Bronson received less money than Brunner and McQueen, but gained one of the film's probably the most memorable character arcs ever. It's a great character arc, really, because there's redemption for this character coming. James Corbin played Britt, and this Britt is the honourable gunfighter. He's kind of supposed to represent the silent character from the Seven Samurai. He's a knife-throwing jeweler. In fact, the knife-throwing duel is one of the film's most memorable scenes, despite the fact that James doesn't have that many lines to say at all. If any, there's like 1 or 2 words. Now, Corbin was a fan of the Seven Samurai, and when James heard that the American version was being made, he begged to be cast. He also had a friend on the cast already called Robert Vaughn, and Robert Vaughn, knowing fully well that they were struggling to get people to play the roles for this movie, and with a looming actors strike coming up, they needed to cast all the roles, otherwise the film would be held up. So he suggested James Corbin. Now, because the reason being is James Corbin had actually seen the movie many, many times. In fact, so many times, and it's unusual because it's not the sort of film you can actually access easily back in those days. So, he knew that story back to front and that character as well. So, he was actually thrilled to find out he was going to get cast in the role inspired by his favourite samurai character, the Silent, and he plays it well. James Corbin's role helped launch him into a successful career, including The Great Escape, and an Oscar win later for Affliction in 1997. And then off-screen, Corbin became close friends with Steve McQueen. The two shared a love of motorcycles and fast cars, and James Corbin formed a lot of very close relationships on that film, as it happens. Then we have Robert Vaughn. Robert Vaughn played Lee, who is the cowardly and haunted gunman. Was a really unusual anti-Western character at the time. Vaughn is a strange individual in that he's a great actor. He's early in his career here, but there's some really odd sort of machinations with Vaughn here. Vaughn used a pair of black gloves to help separate his character from the other characters and to help define Lee without the dialogue, because the Lee character doesn't have a lot of dialogue and he doesn't have a lot of scenes really. He hasn't just enough. So to help separate him, the black gloves were a factor. And they were also sort of a symbolization of the fact that he's a professional gunfighter, but he never seems to actually fight. And black gloves represent the bad man. For those of you who don't know, usually black gloves represents the white gloves, good guy, black gloves, bad man, right? So Vaughn later admitted that he thought the script was weak. It had been rewritten so many times. But Lee gets a redemption moment before he is killed in the story. And I think that's one of the biggest elements of the Lee character. So at 27, Robert was the youngest of the 7 main heroic characters. And Robert Vaughn became a lifelong friend with Steve McQueen during the filming, one of McQueen's few confidants in Hollywood. And later Vaughn became famous on television for The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Robert also played the main character in a movie called Battle Beyond the Stars, the science fiction version of The Seven Samurai. I'm not going to say too much about Battle Beyond the Stars. I suggest you watch it once. You don't have to watch it again after that. It's not the best movie. It's certainly not one of a movie that I love. But it is a film. In any case, Robert Vaughn is sort of a standout person in terms of the fact that he's done so much. We have Brad Dexter, who played Harry Luck, the high-rolling, greedy gunfighter, convinced that treasure must be hidden or behind this mission to save the villagers, the Mexican villagers. Less famous than his co-stars. Brad wasn't really well known. Dexter became known as the forgotten member of the Seven. I actually think that's kind of unfair. I don't think that he's forgotten at all. I think his role in the movie is he's not necessarily people's favourite. He's less flashy in the film, and he's also probably the least memorable of all the characters until the end of the story, where he actually sort of gives his life. Dexter gave a sort of very grounded sort of performance that certainly balanced the bigger personalities. But he's also, I'm pretty sure Brad is the one who decided to start reciting Shakespeare when crossing a stream. So yeah. So Brad later became the producer and manager for Frank Sinatra, believe it or not. Dexter, in fact, saved Sinatra from drowning in Hawaii and basically earned lifelong loyalty from Sinatra, which I think, sort of says a lot about an individual who can achieve that. So he was taking the backstage rather than the front in front of the camera later on in life. But his character is still fantastic. Now, you may or may not know this character. This individual, Horst Buchholz, I think that's Holst, Buchholz, played Chico. You probably know him more from later on in life. The character Chico was inspired by the eager apprentice samurai from Kawasaka's original film, and Chico's playful bullfight that was added into the film was done so for comic relief after a real bull accidentally wandered onto the film set, so they decided to use the bull. I think that's quite dangerous. You could wind up with a bull sort of charging at you and causing a lot of damage, but clearly Horst didn't worry too much about it, or somebody didn't, because it happened. Horst is a German actor. He played the hot-headed sort of youth, sometimes called the German James Dean. Horst was very much inserted as the more romantic figure to broaden the film's appeal, obviously. On set, Horst's brashness sort of reportedly annoyed some of the older cast members, but he certainly held his own. You don't see him return, even though he does survive to the end. After The Magnificent Seven, he worked with Billy Wilder in 1, 2, 3 in 1961. And he's been in a lot of other films as well. We're going to get to our villain, our main villain. So Eli Welch played Calvera. Eli nearly stole the film with his sort of charismatic bandit chief portrayal. Eli brought sort of humor and a humanity to what could have been a stock villain. You really did sort of, you don't like him, but you get his point, like you should with any villain, right? He was a respected stage actor from New York, and Eli trained under Lee Strasberg in terms of acting. Eli spent about an hour each day just riding around with his bandit gang to bond and practice riding. And because his bandit gang was made up of people who knew how to ride and shoot, and some of them had some dodgy backgrounds, they looked after Eli pretty well. Taught him how to ride, checked his horse, checked his guns, checked anything that was going to involve any kind of risk to him, and almost acted as his bodyguard. It's amazing that this particular actor had such a bond that developed with the locals. Now, during filming in Mexico, Eli had close calls with misbehaving horses and poorly managed explosives, but handled it pretty calmly, even though he's got not just all of the special effects people making sure that he's all right, and he's also got like 50 other individuals or close to making sure he's safe. He came out of it, and later Eli became one of cinema's sort of greatest character actors, famous for the good, the bad, and the ugly in 1966 with Clint Eastwood. And Eli would often play the bad guy. It was quite common. He did it well, and he has his reasons for doing so. Vladimir Sokolov. Oh, geez, I'm going to get this name wrong. I do apologize. Vladimir Sokolov played the wise village elder who convinces the townspeople to hire gunfighters, go buy guns, but then they wind up hiring gunfighters in the end. A Russian-born actor, Vladimir had a long career in Hollywood playing multi-ethnic roles, and Vladimir brought gravitas and dignity to the film, the village's plight, giving the story a more sort of a moral code. But he also represented a character which was the fact that you had to do it yourself. Ultimately, in the end, what he says to the villagers is what has to happen for it to all work. Many of the Mexican villages in the film were played by local extras and actors from Mexico, and some of them weren't actors at all. They were just locals that they just used, and they were in the film, and that means that you get a lot of authenticity. It certainly helps ground the film, and certainly in contrast to what I would say is very stylized, polished gunman. You don't get that in this film. You get a much rougher look. And then there's one other person who I wouldn't say did the best acting role in this film, or even has the best character, but we have to mention her, and that's Rosenda Monteros. Monteros played Petra, an amazingly beautiful village girl who fears the gunfighters and falls in love with the most reckless and immature of all the gunfighters, as it happens. Rosenda was a Mexican actress. She studied drama under Siki Sano and had a really long stage acting career. Very, very capable actress. And she's a standout, and she doesn't even get the best character arc, the best lines, or anything like that. Particularly in a film that is predominantly men. Okay, if you've been listening to this, you know the story of the Seven Samurai, and you probably know the story of the Magnificent Seven. So I'm going to go through the plot, but I want to break it down and analyze it a little bit. I think just going over the plot is boring, so I want to analyze it and sort of pull it apart a bit. So we start off with a poor Mexican farming village that's terrorized by a bandit chief called Calvera and his gang. And Calvera raids them regularly for food and supplies, and desperate, the villagers are told by the elder to hire guns or buy guns. Go buy guns. It's not actually to hire gunmen at all. They wind up doing that to protect themselves. Actually, the village elder says, go buy guns, and they say, well, we don't know how to use them. Learn to use them. Learn to shoot. You have to protect yourself or you are going to die. That's it. It's as simple as that. Whether it's from starvation or getting shot by Calvera's men, it doesn't matter. This is not a tale of frontier expansion like a lot of westerns were, but of oppressed people resisting exploitation. It's one of my favourite topics. It frames the western within a moral struggle about justice and survival, which I enjoy. The Mexican villagers travel to a town and meet Chris Adams, a seasoned gunfighter, and Chris gradually assembles a team of 6 other gunfighters, each with a different skill and different motivations. And this is sort of the crux of the Magnificent Seven. So this section highlights the mythic nature of the 7 warriors. Each man is defined by a single trait. So you have the leader, which is Chris. You have the sidekick, which is Vin. You have the veteran, which is Bronson. You have the knife fighter, or the silent, which is Britt. And then you have the haunted man, which is Lee. You have the opportunist, which is Harry. And you have the rookie, which is Chico. Together they form an sort of an archetypical team of specialists that really inspired later films like the Dirty Dozen and Ocean's 11. A lot of those films come from this sort of ensemble, and everybody has a particular purpose towards the end goal. The 7 gunfighters arrive in the village and begin fortifying the village. The gunfighters teach the farmers to fight. They help build defences and explain how to do it, and they bond with that community. It's at this point that we see Bernardo connecting with the children. We see Lee and the villagers sharing their struggle with fear. They both feel fear, both the villagers and Lee, and so they have something to share about that. Harry seeks the villagers' perceived secret treasure, so he's trying to find out where is the good stuff, where's the gold, where's the silver. And Chico falls in love with the village girl, which he's trying hard not to. But it's happening. And then we get what is essentially a training montage, which became, I would say, the template for later mentor-pupil scenes in films, ranging from epic war to sports dramas. There's a lot of sports dramas that use the training montage, and the training montage for war is a common one as well. And so this is where I think a lot of that came from, was from this film. The 7 realise they are not just mercenaries, but they are teachers and protectors. The farmers evolve from not just being victims of bandits, but becoming independent, self-reliant fighters as well. So they're going to have to do everything. They're going to have to farm the land, and they're going to have to fight to keep it. Thematically explores whether violence can serve as a just purpose, and whether true strength lies in sort of, the fact that you have strength, or does true strength lie in the community? And I think those are great themes to explore in any kind of film. Calvera's men attack but are driven off by the 7's superior skills and strategy, and also the villagers are really excited and joyful by that victory, and a lot of them who get involved are emboldened to do more. They feel like they're changing inside. They don't feel the same way they did before. Unfortunately, this victory is temporary, and the gunfighters know it, so they decide to put into play a surprise attack on the bandits in their own camp, only to find that the bandits have left their camp and gone somewhere else. So despite the fact the gunfighters succeeded in the first attack, some of the villagers begin to fear reprisals from Calvera, and so a few of the villagers secretly lead the bandits back into the village, allowing the 7 gunfighters to be captured, unfortunately. And this betrayal emphasizes the peasants' desperation. It also illustrates the theme of dependency, even when offered with protection. The villagers are conditioned to submit to the bandits. Fear of death is a big deal. This really does heighten the Seven's sacrifice in the end, as they fight for people who don't fully trust them and have no loyalty to them. They haven't known them long enough to develop any kind of loyalty. In many respects, a lot of the villagers don't even have loyalty to their own village, which is odd. They have only loyalty to the idea of keeping themselves alive. But there are different patterns. It's not like this one pattern, one stereotype. There's lots of different sort of characters within the village. The 7 gunfighters stay to face Calvera in a climactic battle after being allowed to actually leave peacefully by Calvera. Several gunmen are killed, but the bandits are ultimately defeated, and Calvera is killed. And this battle shows the cost of heroism. Most of the 7 die. Only 3 actually do survive out of the 7, so 4 of them die. And this highlights the tragedy, the fact that their skills make them powerful, but even an expert gunfighter is mortal. They can fall. The victory really belongs to the farmers, not the gunfighters. And it's not really highlighted, but a lot of the villagers are also killed. But this is not sort of highlighted. The fact is, there are a lot of villagers that are also killed, not just the gunfighters. And then we have Chris and Vin. They're left alive, and as they leave the village, Chris reflects that only the farmers won. We lost, we always lose. And this is a conversation he kind of has with the elder as they're leaving, knowing fully well, what it really meant. And that this line is taken almost directly from the 7 Samurai. It encapsulates the film's bittersweet tone, triumph mixed with futility, and because Brunner delivered it with restraint, he was very restrained. Brunner's not always restrained, but he was restrained in this case. It certainly leads weight to the closing reflection. There is one character that does survive and does something that the other gunfighters don't do, and that is Chico is the only one from the 3 that survive who decide to stay and try to settle down with a village woman or girl and put his guns down. And we see that. And I think you see the two sides. You see a new hope, because the worst thing for the gunfighters is probably not necessarily dying. It's the fact that they just don't belong. They don't have anything. This ending flips the traditional Western, ultimately. Instead of celebrating rugged heroes, it honours the quiet endurance of the ordinary people, and the 7 may be magnificent, but they are also doomed outsiders, unable to settle down or belong. And I mean, that's certainly the case for 2 of them, but the movie presents at least one character as having hope. And yes, Chico used to be a farmer, and yes, Chico is the younger of the gunfighters, so he's probably more able to change. But there's still hope, even for the gunfighters, even with that end scene. So, look, I'm going to say it now. The Magnificent Seven is one of the best Western films I've ever seen. I think it's one of the best films, Western films ever made. With all of the strife that might have been taking place. Things happen on film sets. It's never calm. But this film balances action with themes of sacrifice and honour and the futility of violence and the need to stand up for yourself. The fact that you can't just let somebody else do it for you. And yes, a lot of that does happen in this film, but ultimately, if it was just the gunfighters fighting that battle, they would have lost. And if it was only the villagers fighting that battle, they would have lost. The villagers and the gunfighters together, the only way they could have succeeded. And I think that is an important aspect of it. The Magnificent Seven became one of the first Hollywood westerns to cast the gunfighter as a tragic expendable outsider rather than the triumphant hero, believe it or not. And the film launched several actors in stardom, and it was followed by sequels, a lot of sequels, none of which did as well as the first one, a TV series, and also a remake of the film in 2016. And I think that remake is a fairly solid remake, although I still think I like the original more. But sometimes it's the difference between eating a red M&M and a green M&M sometimes. The difference is just not significant enough to worry about. Did I like both of them? Of course I did. And I thought they were both done really well. So I'm hoping that you liked what I had to say. I just needed to get it out there. I've loved this film for so long, and I love westerns. It's one of my favourite genre. I come from New Zealand. I'm not American, but I still like the concept of the western and the cowboy. And I'm going to probably do a lot more about westerns in the future, for sure. Absolutely. So what am I doing next week? I'm really not too sure. I've got a couple of doozies. I need to be in the right frame of mind to decide. I think it's going to be an older movie. It might wind up being science fiction. It might wind up being a westernish kind of movie, or I don't know. We'll see. Maybe even a war movie. Maybe one of those. Anyway, all the best, and I'll see you later.